Hello and welcome to the Foundations Limited Set Review. Today I'm going to be going over the cards in Foundations, specifically the multicolored ones, and how good I think they're going to be in Limited. If you have not been to one of my set reviews before, or even if you have, I would encourage you to read the descriptions of what my tiers are. I use 5 tiered system to determine card strengths and sort of like as a way to facilitate me talking about the cards. Essentially, tier 1 is good, tier 5 is bad. I've now added sort of what picks in the draft I would take these cards. The reason for this is I really, that's what I want this to reflect. Like, I want this set review to reflect where I would take the cards in the draft, not necessarily how good they are on the battlefield. And I think that's like a distinction that is important to indicate in the sort of the tier numbers. So, be advised, there are now more concrete tiers than there used to be, and as a result, things we're trying to be a little more deliberate with that. And I'm just gonna start reading the cards. There's actually not that many of them this time in the multicolored space, so we're gonna begin with Alesa, I don't know, who laughs at fate. 1 black, red for a 2/2 with first strike. When it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it has a raid at the beginning of your end step if you attack this turn. Return target creature, card with mana value less than or equal to Alesa's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So obviously really nice. Technically, you can get a 2-drop back if you played this on like turn 5 or something. I mean, I guess if you attack with your 2-drop trade, maybe I should put this in tier 1 then. The thing is, you just don't always trade off, but sometimes you just do, and then like you attack with your 2-drop, play this on 3, and then you get it back. That's kind of like a huge swing, actually. And then it still is attacking as like a 3-mana 3/3 first striker, which is just always going to connect. And in this set again, so one of the things to note about this set too is that the power level is lower than a typical standard set, at least for most cards. So like this card would be like in a normal set, I would be like, oh, it's not that great, it's a 2/2, whatever. And the big issue with this is it does just die to the 2 1-mana common removal spells that are going to be very premium in this set. So like it just kind of dies to the best things. Well, maybe we could move it up to tier 1. Yeah, I mean, it only needs to, like, you only need to imagine a world where you attack with your 2-drop and your opponent, like, blocks. Now, again, if we talk about, stuff being smaller, format being slower, how important is it to have a 2-drop at, like, on 2? Like, is there going to be a lot of 2-drops getting blocked on turn 2? Kind of an interesting question to think about. I'm going to leave this here. The line of text of returning something I think is sort of more visually appealing than it actually is going to be in terms of like actual appeal. But this is a good card. I think it's going to perform well. Anthem of Champions, green-white for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Very simple. It is an Anthem. Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's 2 mana is not the most relevant thing of all time. If we sort of, again, if I talk about that thing, I'm like, oh, well, if 2-drops aren't a thing that you care about, and you can play this on 2 instead of a 2-drop, and like that's actually like a good way to spend 2 mana instead of playing a bad 2-drop, which there are many of in this set. Like that actually is kind of an advantage of it being 2. Also, just there's a decent amount of token makers in the set. There's white commons and uncommons that make two creatures when they enter. There's green stuff that this works with too. I think this is going to kind of be like the reason to draft green-white. If you have this card, you can draft the color pair, and otherwise you probably aren't going to want to. Yeah, I mean, I think, just a 2-mana Anthem is strong, is kind of the takeaway here. Obviously, it does have the problem of with Anthems, which is like, hey, if you don't have creatures, like, if you mulligan and you have an Anthem, like, your Anthem is actually, like, way worse, so, like, there's that to think about, but yeah, I mean, I think we're just gonna rate it really high and see how it goes. Ashe Animist, 2 red-green for a 4/4 with trample. When it attacks another target creature you control gets trample and +X/+X, where X is this creature's power. So this is really big. This is a really big guy. And back in the day, 4-mana 4/4 trample would be, really really strong. I still think even though we're headed back in that direction, I don't feel like 4 mana 4/4 trample by itself is, doing a lot. Now that being said, if this thing gets to attack, there's a lot of cards in this set where I'm like, man, if you untap, this is like almost like great. And this, if you untap, is really good. Now you do need another creature as well, and these are sort of the things I'm nitpicking to keep that at tier 1. It's a strong card, and I could even see it being tier 1 again. Like I'm certainly a product of my time in the sense that like I'm gonna have a difficulty evaluating this set's like power level because I'm used to modern limited where like this would probably be maybe like this might be closer to tier 3 than tier 1. This is obviously not there, but I'm leaving in tier 2. I think it's a good card, but I'm not the most excited ever of all time. Balmore. Battle Mage Captain. Blue-red for 1/3 with flying. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. This is a card I have played with in limited, in recent limited, in a format that was actually pretty slow. I actually think DMU is going to be a really comparable format to this one in terms of how the speed of the format. I would guess. Balmore was excellent in that format. It did not live up to the hype. Like people thought it was going to be like one of the best signposts of all time. It didn't live up to that hype, but still was very, very strong. And Blue-Red was good. They actually brought back the Tolarian Terror as well. So like everything, the gang is all back. Not all. Again, there's like a think twice in this set. I think Balmore is going to work. I think Balmore is going to be very good. I think Blue-Red's going to be a good deck. So I expect Balmore to continue to pick up where I left off. I think it's going to be a very strong card. Consuming Aberration. 3 blue-black for a star. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. When you cast a spell, each opponent reveals the top of their library until they reveal a land card. Put those cards into their graveyard. So, in a lot of spots, this is going to be like a 5 mana 3/3 or 4/4. Sometimes it's going to be more or less than that. It's going to depend. And then when you cast a spell, it like you can probably double spell on turn 6 in a lot of spots, and then it's like big. So like this is mostly just like a large. Like that's kind of what this creature is. It's just 5 mana for eventually you get a large creature. Is that good? Not really, but it's not. I don't think it's unplayably bad either. I would rate this lower. Like I would rate this lower again in a modern limited set. I would basically give this an out. Like I put this in tier 5. Like I would never play this probably, but I just think the tick slower. Like it is eventually a big threat. Like it's gonna be huge. Like if you think of this as like, oh, it's a 5 mana 6/6 in like a turn, it's like, okay, well, how good is a 5 mana 6/6? It's like, well, it's okay. This does like threaten to mill. Like it can be big. Like it does scale with the game a little bit. Like if you are in a longer game, it will continue to scale. It enables itself, and you can like it's always going to at least grow 1 whenever you cast a spell, which makes me think that on turn 6 it's going to grow twice, because like if you're not double spelling on turn 6, I don't really know what's going on. Like your opponent casts spells too. I think this is going to be bigger than it may look. It has, I don't know. The problem is it has the issue of in the matchups like against aggro decks, it's going to be bad because there's not that much stuff in their graveyard. And then in control of that matchups, it's going to be bad because they have interaction. So yeah, I'm actually just going to bump it down a tier. It just, like, to me, it just kind of like the no good matchups element of it is a problem. Because again, against aggro decks, it's bad because it's small and doesn't stabilize you. And then against control decks, it's bad because whether it's large or not, they can kill it. Like, or just bounce it, or it's just, and it doesn't do anything. It just sits there, and like you're not gonna mill them with this. Like, you're not gonna deck somebody with this. It's too slow. Next, Dreadwing Scavenger, 1 blue-black for a 2/2 flying. When this creature enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card, and it has threshold. It gets +1/+1 and death touch for as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyards. I really like this. We just had threshold in Bloomborough, and in this set it's going to be I would say pretty equally difficult to enable. It wasn't the easiest thing to enable in Blue and this set's going to be similarly tough. But I mean, this card helps a lot, and I mean, just kind of think of it as like a looter that just gets to attack and has flying. It seems pretty good to me. Like it just seems like a solid rate card. I think this is going to be pretty good in this format. Does have the problem of dies to the cheap interaction. I mean, the cheap interaction just really strong. Like, what are you going to do? It at least does get some value on entering the battlefield, so we accept that. Alenda, Saint of Dusk. 2 white-black for a 4/4 lifelink with hexproof from instance. As long as your life total is greater than your starting life total, it gets +1/+1 and has menace. It gets +5/+5 as long as your life total is at least 10 greater than your starting life total. Yeah, this card is very sick. Like, 4 mana 4/4 lifelink is already a strong card. It would already be like a tier 2 card. The fact that you get hexproof from instance, which are the best removal spells typically, makes this really strong. If you are at 21 life, it has menace and is 5/5. Like, that's really strong. It helps you gain life, so that's nice. I don't know. It just kind of does it all. Like, it really just does everything. There's nothing not to like about this card, really. Like, it just is kind of a beating. And I think it's going to be one of the stronger rares in the set. That is my expectation with this one. Empyrean Eagle, 1 white-blue for 2/3 flying. Other creatures you control with flying, +1/+1. So, this is just a nice little signpost in blue-white. There are a bunch of flyers in blue-white. The one issue I have with this card is that I am worried about, like, creatures with flying being your deck, like, being your archetype. Like, is that a thing that is functional? I'm not so sure. There are some... There's a 1-mana... The 1-mana 1/1 lifelink is just kind of like the white 1-mana 1/1 lifelink. You can go with this. It's kind of a house. I don't know. I think this will get there. I mean, being a flying lord is good. One of the problems with flyers is typically that they're undersized, so they don't race super well, but this allows you to race a little bit better. And it's something you got to kill, and it has 3 toughness, which is kind of a nice number in this format. Fiendish Panda. 2 white-black for a 3/2. When you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. When it dies, return another target non-bear creature with mana value less than or equal to this creature's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this type of effect is usually very bad. The thing I kind of like about this is, again, there's a lot of ways to gain like incidental life in this set, so I think that this being a 4/3 when it enters is not like impossible. And usually it will have a target at least. Like usually it will at least have a target that you can hit with it. It's only 4 mana, which isn't the worst. I just kind of like it. It's kind of pulling and pushing me in different directions, because when I see this template of card, I'm like, oh, thing dies, do something, return a thing. It has to have a certain criteria. I'm like, like I don't like that. But the life gain stuff I think is kind of real. There's a lot of ways to gain life in this set. Like, there's just a lot. And especially in black-white, which is a life gain deck, which is indicated by this panda here. And the thing is, like, you're going to have a target, I would say the majority of the time. If you miss, how bad is it? It's pretty bad, but I just don't think you're going to miss that much. I don't know. I'm putting it in tier 3. It's kind of a, wishy-washy grade. Maybe not like the most like, I wanted to put it in tier 4, but I just kind of like, I think there's enough going on here that it is sort of something you can do. I don't think it's something you want to take early, but if you got it at like pick 6, pick 7, you could be like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing, and I'm happy to try to do that. I don't know. That's the kind of the range that I sort of envision this card, and for me that puts it in tier 3. Good Fortune Unicorn. 1 green, white for a 2/2. Whenever another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So the problem with this is that it is a 3-mana 2/2. Obviously, when it works, it's great. And there's a lot of, again, I talked a lot about this. There's a lot of things that make multiple bodies in green and white, which is true. There are. And +1/+1 counters are good, and like this kind of works with everything. The problem again though is like it's a 3-mana 2/2, and a 3-mana 2/2 is pretty bad. Again, your opponent's like, what if my opponent doesn't have the removal spell? It's so I guess my question is like how much value, like you need to get at least 2 counters on this for it to be worth it, right? Just playing a 3-mana 2/2 that puts a +1/+1 counter on something eventually is not great. So like you can't put the counters wherever you want. You only get 1 per creature. I don't know. It doesn't excite me. It doesn't make me excited. I'm gonna be honest, because it just seems like the one sort of like saving grace with this is that green white is trying to go wide. I would imagine, like obviously this is telling you that it wants to go wide, but like overrun existing is kind of a thing where you're like, okay, well I can just sit around forever and then eventually have like 8 creatures in play and attack with everything. Like that's kind of what you're trying to do. It's antithetical to like everything that I want to do in Magic. Like it's definitely not my natural playstyle. Like I'd really like to have just like get the stuff traded off. Like get it traded off. Get like whatever. Reduce my opponent's outs to do stuff with their things. But that's not how this card, like what this card incentivizes you to do. So I don't know. It's not. I'm starting low on it, but we will see. Heroic Reinforcements. 2 red white for a sorcery. Create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens until end of turn. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste. I mean, this is a strong one. I feel. So originally when I read this card, I thought you only gave the soldiers +1/+1, and then I was like, this card's bad. But then I reread it, and I was like, oh, everything gets +1/+1. That's really strong, and indeed it is, because you're getting 2 2/2s with haste, which is good, and you know the creatures are a little smaller in this set, so those can attack at a higher frequency than usual. And then you're like pumping your whole team, and there is like some minor go wide themes. Like this just seems pretty strong. Also on like turn 6, you can do the like play a 2-drop, play this, give everything haste. Like it gives everything haste. I don't know. I like it a lot. Now, tier 3 is indicative of the fact that it costs 4 mana, and like can you like. Do you want to take this early? And maybe you do. And like maybe I should just move it up because like you probably do just want to take this early. The issue again is 4 mana and by itself is not like it has the problem of, well, I'd really like to have a lot of 2-drops, and there aren't very many premium 2s in this set. Like there just aren't as many of them as there usually are. So would I take this over a premium 2? It's like probably not. So that's why I have it here. You can convince me to move it up, and maybe I should just move it up because it is kind of a lot, and it always does something at least. All right, I'm convinced. I'm moving it up. I convinced myself. Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's going to be strong enough that like you're just always going to want this type of effect. Like it just is. The fact that it makes the guys too just seems really nice. And yeah. Coma, World Eater, 3 green and blue for an 8/12. It can't be countered. It has trample and word 4. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create 4 3/3 blue serpent creature tokens named Coma's Coil. Synergizes really well with the other Coma. But so this is good, obviously. The thing about it is that it's 7 mana. That's a problem. I think in blue-green that should be doable. I don't think that's going to be like that hard to do. When you cast it, you know, Ward 4 is kind of like a hell of a drug. Like, it means that like Bake Into a Pie can't kill it unless your opponent has 8 mana. It costs 7 mana to kill it. Like basically this is going to cost 7 mana minimum to remove from your opponent. So at least you're trading evenly on mana even if they remove it, which is going to be tough to do. And if it gets to attack, you win the game. So that's also really nice. Like it's just a really it's basically going to win the game when you cast it, because like your opponent probably can't kill it, and when it attacks them, you make 4 guys, and then you just win. So Coma's really strong. Kidar Zephyr Awakener. 2 white-blue for a 3/4 with flying. When you cast a non-creature spell, you can choose one. Exile another target creature you control. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Or you can create a 1/1 spirit creature token with flying. Yeah, I mean, this is really nice. It's kind of a nice little like reward for casting non-creature spells. You can do it as many times as you want in a turn, which is really good. I really like this card. I could put it in tier 1. The reason I haven't is that it is just kind of a... I mean, I guess a 4-mana 3/4 flyer in this set isn't so bad. Yeah, and you can like build around it. It is another one of the cards like I talked about earlier where I'm like, well, if you untap with this, you're going to be thrilled. And I'm always like scared of those cards because again, the removal isn't bad in this set. You got Banishing Light, Bake into a Pie, you got others, like you just got other stuff that can like... And it does nothing when it ETBs. I don't know. I'm going to leave it in tier 2. Cautiously, like I would love. I think it's going to be maybe better than that. I think it's very good, but the removal angle exists. Lathril, Blade of the Elves. 2 black green for a 2/3 with menace. When it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. I don't know if I got the spacing right in between elf and warrior. It's kind of a weird. Anyways, you can tap it to tap 10 untapped elves you control. Each opponent loses 10 life and you gain 10 life. So, again, with the whole, like, if you untap with it, great, but, man, I sure hope my 4-mana 2/3 doesn't die. I think it's going to be able to get in for damage. Like, you're going to be able to get in green-black. I think that the menace helps enough that you should be able to attack through some stuff. It still isn't perfect, but, you only have to connect once for it to be, like, really good. It is a big threat. I think it's okay. I think it's probably going to be not amazing, but I think it's going to be okay. Muldrotha the Gravetide. 3 black, green, and blue for a 6/6. During each of your turns, you may play a land and cast a permanent spell of each permanent type from your graveyard. So it's a big 6-mana 6/6 that gets you some value. Another card that basically is just like untap. You got to untap for it to do anything. I actually think I'm going to bump it down, maybe. I don't know. It is nice. Like, you can probably only play like one thing and it has to be in your graveyard, but like it's not like bad. It's not bad. Like a 6-mana 6/6 isn't terrible. It just isn't probably gonna win you the game. Again, I'm trying to be am I overcorrecting for like the set being slower? It is also 3 colors. Let's bump it down a tier. I don't know. I just... The 3 colors is kind of the tiebreaker for me. Just like, okay, well, I mean, the fixing's not, like, completely garbage in the set. Like, you can cast this, but is that worth doing? It doesn't seem, like, super worth it to me. But when it works, it's going to look amazing. I just don't know how much stuff you're actually going to be able to get into your graveyard. Niv Mizzet Visionary. 4 blue-red for a 5/5 flying, you have no maximum hand size. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards. So there's actually a decent number of ways to do this. There's an uncommon dragon that pings for 1 when a dragon enters. That's the best one because you get the 1 immediately. 6-mana 5/5 flying is not terrible by itself. This is a threatening one. I think it's going to be pretty good. If this were printed in a normal standard legal set, as a normal set, I would be like, not that excited about it, but again, I'm doing some correcting here. There are ways to damage your opponent. Not a ton of them, but there are ways. It's just also a big flyer, so I think this is a thing you can kind of build around a bit, and I think it's doable. Perforating Artist. 1 red black for a 3/2 with Death Touch, which will raid at the beginning of your end step. If you attack this turn, each opponent loses 3 life unless they sacrifice an on-them permanent or discard a card. Yeah, I mean, this seems fine. Like, again, you want to be attacking with your 2-mana thing, and there's a lot of stuff with raid in the set. Like, raid is kind of a thing that's going on. Kind of a weird body, like a 3/2 Death Touch. If this were a 2/3, I would be like really interested. Like, I would like it a lot. I would put it basically, if this were a 2/3 Death Touch instead of a 3/2, I would put this in tier 2. Because it's not, I'm putting it in tier 3 because it dies to the 1-mana interaction, which is going to just be unbelievable. Because of the stat line, I'm bumping it down a tier, but I still think it's fine. This effect repeatedly on a guy that can like attack and do other stuff is nice. Progenitus. Double Wooburg for a 10/10 with protection from everything. If it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. Obviously not playable in limited, but a cool card to have around in standard, and I kind of like that it exists. It only ever does stuff when there's like a broken thing going on, but I kind of like that. Yeah, Progenitus. You know it. You know Progenitus. You love Progenitus. Ruby Daring Tracker. Red-green for a 1/2 with haste. When it attacks while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and you can tap it to add red or green. So the only time the power 4 or greater archetype has really ever worked was in Wilds of Eldraine. It like kind of worked. It still was not the best deck or like anywhere near the best deck, but it was playable. And this was a large part of the reason why, because like you could, it's a mana thing that accelerates your big stuff out, and also it can attack in the mid to late game, which is really nice. So I think this is a good reprint, and this is going to be a viable deck as a result of this card existing. It's just a solid card, a solid 2-drop. Again, not a ton of those in the set, so like it a lot. Swiftblade Vindicator, red-white for a 1/1 with double strike, vigilance, and trample. It's a good 2-drop. Again, the whole just like enters the battlefield and just dies to removal and didn't do anything angle is not where I want to be, but I think this is good, solid 2-drop. French vanilla, all that good stuff. Tati Overa, Benthic Druid, 3 green, blue for a 3/3. When a land you control enters, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So, people have talked to me and told me that like I have heard many times that this card was good in like Dominaria or whatever. I've never I've seen it do things before in some form. I forget even which format I saw like played with this in, but I have played with it before, and I don't know. It's never really impressed me. It's very slow. It does solve the landfall problem of like, oh, you keep drawing more lands when your landfall does something. Like it does kind of help a little bit. It's really small. But I kind of have some faith. Like, I kind of think you could do this, and I'm sure people will try. 1,000-Year Storm. 4 blue-red for an enchantment. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell you've cast before this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. A very fun card, also very bad. Because it costs 6 mana and is an enchantment that does nothing. So, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, that's basically the beginning and the ending of it here. Like, it just is 6 mana and there's not enough. Like, in theory, you could construct a turn where you're like, oh, I do this and this and this, but, like, if you untap and do that, like, this could have just been anything and you would have won that game. So, it's just never good enough. Wardens of the Cycle. 1 black, green, green for a 3/4 with Morbid. At the beginning of your end step, if your creature died this turn, choose 1, you gain 2 life, or you draw a card and lose 1 life. So, Morbid never works. It has never worked in the history of Magic the Gathering. Every time they have printed it in Limited, it has failed. Literally every single time it has never worked. It has never been a good deck, even once. Even one time ever. I do think this card is okay. I don't know why they felt the need to go double pip on the Forest here, because again, like I said, Morbid has never worked even one time. It has literally never even worked once. They have never succeeded. They have almost not failed a couple of times, but it has a pretty high miss rate. I will say that in Limited, Morbid has a pretty high miss rate in terms of it being like black-green's like signpost mechanic. It has a tough time. I do think this card is good, especially because it's green and not black. Like if it was 1 black green instead of 1 green black, I would hate it more. I don't hate it because it's double green, because that's kind of where you want to. Generally, it's easier to make more green mana than it is to make more black. However, I still don't really believe in Morbid. It's got to prove it to me. I think this card by itself is fine, but your opponent just isn't going to block against your black green deck. They're just not going to block. Like they're just going to be like, oh, okay, I can just take like 3 damage. Like you know what I mean? So it needs some help. And the last multicolored card, Zamone Paradox Sculptor. 2 green blue for a 1/4. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each up to 2 target creatures you control. Green blue, tap. Double the number of each kind of counter on up to 2 target creatures and or artifacts you control. Yeah, I mean, this card's just sick. Like, so, I mean, you get 2 counters on 2 different things. All you need is 1 other creature. You can put the counters on Zamone, which, interesting that they let you do that. There's another card in the set where you can't put the counters on itself, but Zamone you can, so it's sort of a thing to think about. Yeah, I mean, this card's just very, very strong, right? Like, you just has immediate board impact. And like this is like doesn't really feel like a blue-green card, but sure, I guess. I don't know. It just is like making so much power and toughness immediately, and your opponent has to kill it, and it's not that easy to kill. And eventually, it just doubles all your stuff and is like a combat trick on the board, and is going to win you the game. So this card just seems insanely strong to me. I think this is one of the best cards in the set. And that is it. A very short multicolored segment, only half an hour. Usually these take a long time, but actually I think this is going to be one of the shorter multicolored videos I've ever done. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, please stick around. There's going to be more set review content to come. See you.